going to start at the top and go from there. So happy Thursday. Happy 10 days away from the jolly old man himself coming, if he comes to your house. And what I, totally unrelated to woodworking, a thing I had talked a little bit about when I started was, in my family, and my family is very Czechoslovakian, the tradition has always been Christmas Eve is the day, not Christmas Day. Christmas Day is a non-event. And I don't know if that's a Czech thing. So if there are any other Eastern Europeans in the group who also do the same thing, you know, it's all about opening gifts and getting together Christmas Eve, not Christmas Day, and eating kuba and chachka for good luck in the new year. That's the other thing. Both of which are very disgusting, and you do not want to eat kuba and chachka unless you have to have good luck in the new year. Outside of that, thank you to Typon for sponsoring this, on and on and on. And what I was talking about, I think when we broke there, was maybe a month or so ago, I got together myself, Alicia Albertson, Shar Miller King, Paul Mayer, and each of us created a unique cutting board design. On top of that, I did 5 how-to videos that are related to cutting boards. One of the questions that we get so commonly, you know, one, at the basic level, how do I make a cutting board? That's one of the videos, is just how to make a edge grain cutting board. But another one is how to cut in a juice groove. And this is something I stewed on for a long time. It kind of feels like I should be able to do this on a router table, but you really can't. So in the end, I made a very simple jig, and it's a really bulletproof way to put a juice groove into a cutting board, which is, you want it to be bulletproof because at that point you're in up to your eyeballs in cutting board making. The board is done, and you're letting that groove into the top. So that's there, how to do a juice groove, how to put finger holds in the ends of the board, how to make an end grain board, and how to level, whether it's end grain boards or just slabs in general, a shop-made jig for leveling that stuff using a handheld router. That's the 5th video. So there are 5 videos. There's an extensive PDF with the how-to steps to make mine, Paul, Shar's, and Alicia's cutting boards. So scroll down a little bit and you'll see a banner. And if you click on that, you're going to have access to all that cutting board information. And as I mentioned earlier, there's still time, there's still shopping days left, or shop days, to get your cutting board done before Christmas hits. Okay. Tracy asks, what is the correct position for a 3/4 inch resaw blade on bandsaw tires? Getting conflicting guidance, center the blade on the wheel or center the bottom of the gullet? Great question. So I'm just stewing here. Like, I think we can get there from here. So let me, benefit of having my camera gear. Someday I'll have to use a different camera so I can show you my Frankenstein camera mast setup. But it does have casters on it. Little hang up there. But basically what I'm trying to do is get to my bandsaw, which is right there, and at an angle where we can see. So you can see in that window right there, that's a 1/4 inch blade that's on the bandsaw right now. And I'm checking the image. So let's take this question a step further. With a narrow blade like that 1/4 inch blade, the teeth are on the crown of the tire. I'm going to bring you around this way a little bit. Get away from the glare of that plexiglass. About there-ish. So with the 1/4 inch blade, the teeth are on the crown of the tire. With a wide blade, if you do that, if you do the same thing, teeth on the crown, part of the blade is going to be sticking off the back of the wheel. You don't want that. You don't want any blade projecting off the back of the tire or the back of the wheel. So it's going to depend where that line in the sand is on blade width is going to depend on your bandsaw. On this one, I can do 1/4 and 3/8 inch blades like I have this one, which is teeth on the crown. When I go to a 1/2 inch blade, it needs to be centered. And then certainly a 3/4 inch blade would have to be centered. So if your line in the sand is going to be, if putting the teeth on the crown leaves part of the blade sticking off the back, cantilevering off, you don't want to do that. You need to bring it forward and center it. All right, I'm just going to go that far until I see what the next question is. Rob says, when are you releasing your list of in-person woodworking classes for 24? Great question. After Christmas, I'll have like a quarter's worth of them ready. In other words, like not starting in January, but starting in like February. I've got a February commitment. I'm waiting to get the date solidified on. I've got a May commitment, tentative. I mean, not a commitment. I've got a May tentative that I'm waiting to get solidified on, and then that'll let me fill in. Once those get solid, I can fill in between. So if you're looking for that stuff, if you're looking for Where's Waldo, so not just the teaching I do in this shop, but also any teaching I do on the road, Mark Adams School, Rockler Stores, whatever it is. My name, GeorgeVondriska.com, is where that stuff shows up. Mark asks, is cherry difficult to chisel? Mine seem sharp, but I struggle mightily with cherry. Well, let's see. So there's a chunk of cherry. And I don't know, like chisel, what is it you're trying to do? But just to give you a reference, so now I'll see if I can just zoom from here. Cherry, as a rule, the workability of cherry is really good. It's a close-grained wood, like maple and walnut. It's not really, really hard, like a hard maple. So, I mean, it should machine well. It should chisel well. So this, obviously, this is end grain. So if I come as though I want to make a chamfer across that corner, if I actually lock my vise. So I don't know, is that resembling what you're running into? And I would say this chisel is pretty sharp. It could probably get cleaned up a little. It's not razor sharp. And then it's going to be, if I change direction and go long grain, it's going to get even easier. So, little relative perspective of how that's cutting for me. Greg asks, when routing edges, such as with the roundover bit, is there a greater chance to burn end grain than long grain? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So interestingly, it's one of the things we talked about with making an end grain cutting board. Why do we make end grain boards? It's because end grain is harder. So no matter what with the router, you want to keep moving, coming across the end grain. You definitely want to keep the router moving. Don't stand in one spot. Cherry, ironically, is a wood that's very prone to burning if you stand in one spot too long. But yes is the short answer for that. It's going to be best bet is to take light passes, make sure the bit is really sharp, and keep moving on the end grain. Jeff asks, can you recommend a finish for turned wood pens that preserves and protects without making it look like plastic? So let me show you one of my favorite turning finishes, or two of my favorite turning finishes. Okay, I have one. There's the other. So if you've been watching WWGOA for a while, you have seen this shop-made finish before. This is 1/3 boiled linseed oil, 1/3 mineral spirits, 1/3 shellac. So I'm going to say that again because I know in 3 seconds somebody's going to say in the comments, what's the recipe again? 1/3 mineral spirits, 1/3 boiled linseed oil, 1/3 shellac. It's very, very similar to this commercial finish, which is Mylan's friction polish. So I have put on pens a number of times CA glue as a finish. What I like about it, it's highly protective, but it does give them kind of a plasticky look. It's almost like using two-part epoxy to do the buildup on there. And like I said, it gets a little bit plasticky. With both of these finishes, I would say their level of protection is a little bit lower than what you're going to get from that CA glue, but it's a much more organic kind of natural, they look wet, they're protected, they have some gloss, the pens, but they don't have that uber gloss that you get from an epoxy or CA glue, that kind of a finish. So again, Mylan's finish, you can get it on Amazon. The other stuff is shop made, 1/3 shellac, 1/3 boiled linseed oil, 1/3 mineral spirits. And just to get ahead of it, somebody asked, I don't know, within the last month, I live in California, I can't get mineral spirits. What's the substitute for that? I don't know. Because we need, each of those components brings a component to the chemistry of this. And I don't know what you could put in there besides mineral spirits to do what mineral spirits does for this. So I don't have an answer for that. A store that specializes in finishing might have a substitute that has similar attributes to mineral spirits, but isn't mineral spirits, but I don't know. Mike says, when resawing on the bandsaw, is it best to use the widest blade a saw can accept? So use a 3/4 inch if possible, rather than a half. Kind of, yes. I mean, the easy answer is to just say, yeah, go to the widest blade you can. What I would do is, I'm a big fan of Timberwolf low tension blades. They're sold by a company called PS Wood. And it's just pswood.com. If you call them and you say, this is the saw I have, this is what I'm cutting, and where I'm going with this is a different answer if you're resawing green stock, your logs to lumber on your bandsaw, that's resawing. If you're resawing kiln dried stuff, that's also resawing, but it's a different blade selection. So if you call them and you say, here's what I'm doing, they can make a blade recommendation that's perfectly suited to your saw and the exact operation that you're trying to do. And it doesn't have to just be resawing. It could be whatever. I want to cut non-ferrous metal on my bandsaw. What's the best blade for that? It's an extremely dusty day in the shop today, and most of that dust seems to be living in my throat. Stephen asks, what do you think of hard waxes like Rubio, One Coat, and Osmo? I've never used Rubio, so I can't comment on that. Osmo I have used, if you've got my Live Edge slab book, and in that book you can see there's a big book-matched walnut slab dining room table that currently lives at my middle kid's house. That was finished with Osmo Top Oil, I think is what it was called. I liked how it went on. It's a dining room table, so it's been performing really well. That's, I don't know, at least a couple years old, maybe 3 years old now. And it's holding up really well. So yeah, the Osmo I like. Mark says, clean up around router slot. I don't know. Please pose that in the form of a question. I don't know what you're looking for there, Mark. So if you're still on, give me a little elucidation. How long should one wait after gluing up boards for a cutting board before machining? I've had to wait 24 hours before cutting and sanding in the past. Yeah, it's, you know, when Tight Bond Bob was here, it was interesting talking about different glues, different tack times, workability. Realistically, for me, you know, in a cutting board, part of what you're up against is you have a lot of joints, and I would give them, if you're using Tight Bond 3, which is a great glue for cutting boards, I wouldn't machine them for at least a couple hours after you glue them up, just to make sure that you don't undo any of the seams that you have carefully put together. 24 hours, I would say, is more than you need to wait, but I wouldn't jump the gun before like 24-ish. John says, have you ever done a 3-color CNC carve using Aura mask? Whoops, my questions just jumped a little. The 3 colors are really close together. If you have, what would be the proper procedure? Thank you for all your education. So if you've not seen it, what John is asking about, this is a great show and tell live. I'm getting my, as if I don't already have more than 10,000 steps in, I'm definitely getting them in now. So Aura Mask, also available on Amazon. This is Aura Mask. And it's self-adhesive. This is what I use if I'm going to CNC cut a sign where later I'll be painting inside the letters. Then I put this on first, and this you could do this as well if you're hand routing. Put this on, stick it down, and then you cut through this. So it's like, you know, it's a 12-inch wide roll of masking tape. Works really well for that. If you're doing, I made a clock for the boxing gym, I don't know, within the last couple months, and that had 3 colors on it, maybe more. So I did Aura mask it. Then when I did like color number 1, I used masking tape to cover the areas that didn't get that color. Then when I was ready for color number 2, I took off some of the masking tape and I put new masking tape over the other areas where it wasn't getting color number 2, and then same with color number 3. So basically I just exposed and unexposed areas where I wanted that specific color to go. That was like a 16-inch diameter clock, so it was pretty easy to go that route and do it that way. So that worked in that application. Ray says, I make a flag challenge coin case with a lid on top that opens with hinges on the top. A wooden frame lid with plexi. The lid frame is 3/4 pine thick, or 3/4 thick pine, I think is what we mean, and is about 1.5 inches tall. Total dimensions of the lid is about 36 by 19. What is the best way to attach the corners for strength? All right, so basically, if I'm getting this right, it's a frame 3/4 by 1.5, 36 by 19. So I would probably lean toward that. That's a big frame. A finger joint would be a great way to put that together. Outside of a finger joint, I'd be comfortable probably with a domino joint, so some kind of loose tenon in there, a domino or a biscuit. 1.5 inches is actually too narrow to cut biscuits into because the smallest slot is wider than that. But any kind of dowels would help reinforce that. But I think I would, the benefit to a finger joint is the significant amount of overlap that you're getting. Similarly, with any kind of loose tenon, you're increasing your glue surface and by adding that structure to it. So something like that, and finger joint, any kind of loose tenon, bead lock would satisfy that. The domino would satisfy that. Gregory says, I'm just north of New York City for a geographic perspective. Have a large maple tree that is to be cut down. Is it worth the expense of trying to mill this tree for lumber? Maybe. So you can look up on WWGOA a bunch of years ago. I had milled, 40 pine trees into what was going to become flooring for the house. So in the end, I paid a sawyer with a wood miser to come and cut. He had to travel to where I was. We cut 4,000 board feet of 4/4 lumber. Then I took it to a kiln, paid to get it kiln dried. Then I took it to a milling place where I worked along with them. That helped lower the rate, where we milled it into tongue and groove flooring. And overall, I came out at about $1.25 per square foot for this really, really beautiful tongue and groove flooring. So the economics of that were really good here. That was 12 years ago, maybe more, 15 years ago. I don't know what today's going rate is on milling. I know for me, the other caveat to all that was if he hit any piece of metal in the wood, I had to buy that bandsaw blade. So that was, I think it was $35 a blade. And I think that's still about the same price on blades. So there are a lot of variables. What I would do is look at, if you just want to buy maple, what does that cost you? And if you're getting it from a hardwood supplier, the benefit is you've got maple that has been kiln dried. You know it's ready to go. You know it's accurately and correctly dried. The drying process can be dicey. So how much per board foot does that cost? Then, if you can measure the tree, you could find out from a sawyer what's the machining time going to be. From there, if you're just going to stack it up and air dry it, which is fine, there's nothing wrong with air dried lumber, you're not going to use it for at least a year, maybe a couple years. And then it's air dried, not kiln dried. Did you stack it and sticker it correctly? Did it dry okay? One of the beauties of cutting your own stuff, and it's one of the things I really like, I've got a chainsaw-based sawmill. I don't use it too often, but one of the benefits to that is when I cut my own stuff, you get sequence cut material. So sequence cut means from this log, I cut slab number 1, slab number 2, slab number 3, and I label them as such. And if you've resawn on your bandsaw to make a book match, you're doing the same thing on a log with those sequence cut pieces, whether they're slabs, whatever they are. When you put them together, this is the book match walnut table I was just talking about with the Osmo finish. You have a huge book match then. So there are benefits to doing that cutting, tracking the material, and that sequence cut is one of them. So you got to evaluate a bunch of different stuff and decide if that's for you or not, and go from there. It's crazy cool. And if the tree's got any meaning to you, that's what I call heirloom wood. That's pretty neat when, if your kids have had tree houses in that tree or something like that, that kind of thing you can't really put a value on what you're getting out of the material that way, because that's pretty cool. Herb says, what is your recommended finish for a walnut countertop? It's an island with no sink or cooktop. Is Osmo an option? It is. Osmo is an option. What I'm looking at, I'm going to do a new countertop in my break room here and in both of the bathrooms. And I'm going to do those with live edge slabs. And I am going to use Total Boat, I think Gleam. I'd have to look. If you call Total Boat, they'll have a recommendation for you. But if you think about it, Total Boat's start in life was making products for wooden boats. So I think if there's something that can survive watery environments as a wood sealer, Total Boat knows what it is. So when I do these, it's a wear and tear thing. Plus, you want to seal it effectively. So I like the Osmo that went on that dining room table. But I think also a countertop is going to get a lot harder use than a dining room or kitchen table would. So that's what I think it's Total Boat Gleam. But give them a call or email them and see if I'm getting the name right. Mark says, I'm using 2x2 lumber to make a tabletop. I'd like to use biscuits to glue the pieces together. Yeah, it's a good idea. I mean, you don't need to. So again, when Tight Bond Bob was here, we talked about do you or don't you need to reinforce glue joints? If you have a good joint, which means the parts are just naturally closing, then glue is enough. The benefit, especially if you're doing a lot of narrow pieces across a wide table, if you're doing 2x2s on a 36-inch wide table, that's a lot of parts. The benefit biscuits will buy you is keeping everything registered, keeping the tops aligned. So I don't see it as a question, right? Yeah, it's a good approach. Gregory says, what's a good finish for a wood and epoxy chessboard other than a flood coat of epoxy? Whatever finish you like. So I'm trying to think if I have anything in here. I don't think I do. You can finish, if you've got something, whatever it is, a chessboard or a table where it's part wood, part epoxy, and your normal go-to finish is lacquer, you can lacquer over everything when it's done. Part of what, and this is, your mileage may vary, you want to check with your epoxy manufacturer. Part of what I've been told is you want to not over sand the epoxy. It has to have some tooth to it or the finish is going to slough off. So you're not, treat the whole thing. And again, check with what your epoxy manufacturer says about this. But in my case, what I do is I treat the whole thing like one big piece of wood, including the epoxy, and I sand that to 220 grit, and then I finish over the top. There's a little bit of a leaning toward you want to get that gloss in the epoxy that you're expecting it to have before you put finish on. And if you get it that smooth and shiny, your finish isn't going to stick to it. So again, check with your manufacturer. What level do they recommend you sand that to before finish goes over the top? And at the same conversation, you could double check on, are there any compatibility issues? But remember, de-wax shellac is like my best friend in the finishing area and is a go-between that works with pretty much any finish and any base. So if there's any question about that, you should be able to do a seal coat of de-wax shellac and then a top coat of whatever your normal finish is over the top of that. Eldon says, you skipped my question. I don't want my projects to have sharp edges. What's the best way to do a very slight round over? Is a handheld router needed? If If it's a bigger project, using sandpaper is very slow and seems to be unnecessary. I use to barely break an edge on stuff, and I always do this on my projects. I use an 1/8 inch roundover bit in a handheld router, and an 1/8 inch radius is tiny, 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 and there's a couple reasons for this. One is it makes the project more, I don't know, tactile or more tactile friendly. If you leave sharp corners on stuff, nobody wants to touch that. The other thing is wear. Like over time, if you leave a perfect 90-degree corner on a drawer front or the edge of a tabletop, somebody's going to ding into it at some point. So a roundover is, to an extent, dinging it on purpose uniformly ahead of time. You're knocking the corner off. So more friendly to your hands. I think from a wear perspective, it's going to look better longer. Most importantly, I was taught this in a college finishing class, which is finish can't stick to a perfect 90-degree outside corner because you've got kind of a knife edge there. And you can't get any finish build on that. So by easing that corner, you can get at the same mils of finish that you have every place else. And you're going to show wear less quickly by having introduced that ease. So same, like I think this is what you're saying, is on a small scale, I'll use a sanding block and I'll knock the corners off to achieve the same thing, but I don't want to do that to a bookcase. So 1/8 inch roundover bit and a handheld router works great for that. On milling a maple tree, so here's a little bit of follow-up from someone else. I milled a black maple and stacked, stickered, and air dried it to 9%. Very cool. Very hard to keep flat, also a lot of waste. But I have plain, quarter sawn, spalted, heart, and sapwood that make for some very good looking lamps. My second maple off my lot is now firewood because it was way too much work. It's a lot of work. It is a boatload of work. My friend Charlie's got a wood miser and we cut there fairly often. And even he's got a forklift, he's got the wood miser, it's still just handling the material as it's cut and then doing the stickering, doing the stacking, having it in the right spot, the lumber that you're drying. So it's not overly exposed to elements, but it's getting some airflow. There's a lot going on there. Follow-up question to the walnut countertop. Have you used General Finish Armor Seal? No. Total Boat Gleam is a spar varnish. Is that safe for food contact? I'm not sure. I would check with Total Boat. I can, hang on a sec. And it could be, Total Boat has other products. So I have in my hot little hands a gallon of Gleam. So I'm reading really, really, really fast. I don't know. I would call them. There's 30 million words on there. I'll never get through it in the time we have. So call Total Boat, ask them about that, ask them if they have some other recommendation for that. There's also the aspect, and I'm not 100% clear on this, of even with solvent-based finishes, that after X amount of drying time, there's food safeness. Don't quote me on that. So it's just something that needs to be explored. Like like I said, even with the solvent-based finish, that isn't mineral oil, that after X amount of time passes and it's off-gassed, everything it's going to off-gas, that you're okay. But Total Boat will know. They're very sharp. And then Gregory says, thanks for answering the chessboard finish. He used Total Bolt Maker Epoxy on that. Cool. So while I'm searching again for questions, remember, we've got the cutting board information available for you. And it's, when I say information, there is a metric boatload of information there about making cutting boards. Everything from normal edge grain boards to end grain boards to juice grooves, which some people call blood grooves, to finger holds on the end, to shot made jig for leveling stuff. And whether that's a cutting board or just slabs in your shop, the leveling jig will work for that. Plus the plans for the 4 cutting boards that I made one, Paul made one, Alicia made one, Shar made one. So you're right out of the chute, you're getting cutting board plans. Herb says, thank you, George. I enjoy these live events. As always, I use Titebond glue exclusively because of the events. And next time I talk to Titebond, I will tell them. It's good for them to know that stuff. Jim says, I'm working on an aggravation board. I don't know what that is. I've painted the holes and put on a coat of oil-based polyurethane. My helper touched up 2 holes with a permanent Sharpie. The polyurethane made it run. My only choice is to sand down to bare wood and touch up that spot. Any other solution? What grit should I use? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so the sequence of events was paint, oil-based poly, touch up. Well, the touch up must have happened before the polyurethane. So now you've got bleed out under the polyurethane, which is polyurethane is like plexiglass. You know, it's liquid plastic. Yeah, I don't think there is any choice except to sand down. And then it's always dicey. Like if you spot sand and then you go back and just polyurethane that spot, is it going to show? I don't know. It might, because now it's not one uniform coat. It's those dots. And then what grit should I use? So I think knocking down, to get the polyurethane off, I'd probably start at like 150-ish, maybe 180. Start at 180 and see if it's painful. You know what I mean? If it's not even touching it and it's taken a lifetime, then drop a grit. I probably wouldn't go below 150 because you don't want to overly abrade. Eventually you're going to be down to raw wood, and you don't want to put a bunch of swirl marks in that are a lot of work to get out. Mark says, as a follow-up to my biscuit gluing question, 2x2 tabletop. So if the question is, should you use biscuits, then hang on, I'm going back to the first one. I'm using 2x2 lumber to make a tabletop. I would like to use biscuits to glue the piece together. So yes, as a follow-up to my biscuit gluing question, a 2x2 tabletop. So yeah, I think same reasons I said before, like 24-inch wide top, that's a lot of 2x2s. So adding biscuits is going to help them stay even across the top, so you have less leveling to do later. Eldon says, when staining certain woods, I wonder if preconditioner is helpful. Any ideas or suggestions to get a good looking project? So it depends. If you're staining, some woods have a propensity to go blotchy. Birch, maple, pine, woods like cherry can stain okay. Why one would stain cherry, I don't know. So wood conditioner is a way to do that's the benefit of using a conditioner is it'll take the blotchiness out that you would otherwise get. You can also do this with de-wax shellac. So there's somewhere on WWGOA, there's a video about this. And in that video, I take boards, shellac them, scuff them, stain over the top of the scuff, and then other boards where I don't. And it's visually very obvious which ones have been pre-treated and which ones have not. But a wood conditioner, that's what it'll do for you, is it'll give you that same gain of preconditioning the wood so the stain isn't going to get so blotchy on you. So Mark asks, would you recommend a better way to glue the tabletop than using biscuits? Well, if you're careful, you could glue the whole thing up. Careful being keeping them aligned as you go. You could use cawls. So cawls are pieces that would go crossways. You're going to clamp it and squeeze it in this direction. And then you put a cawl on the top and a cawl on the bottom, which clamps it in this direction. You need to pre-treat those cawls so you don't glue them to the project. The other thing you could do, let's say if you've got a normal benchtop planer, those are 12 or 13 inches wide. So you could glue up a 12-inch section, then run that through your planer, glue up the second 12-inch section, run that through your planer. Now those two subsections are dead flat and even, and then do just one more glue up with one seam, which is very easy to keep control of to get it even. And then you only have that one glue up to go. So if it were me, a 24-inch wide table would not fit through my planer. So I would do a section and a section, and then bring those two sections together to do the last glue up. Gregory says, thanks so much for fielding all these questions. Best wishes for the holiday season. Thank you. Same to you. Jeffrey made a garage work table with an MDF top, was considering selling it, or I think sealing it is what we mean. Sealing it with a couple coats of bullseye shellac. In your experience, will that give it a nice durable finish? Shellac it handles easy, it dries fast. It is not the most durable top coat you can put on anything. One of my work tables over here, well, this work table as well, that one is MDF, this one is Baltic birch. I seal those with just an oil, boiled linseed oil or Danish oil. And yeah, if it's a work table, part of the downside to a film finish like a shellac or a lacquer or a polyurethane is that you're going to scratch it over time if it's a work table. And now you've got a scratch in that film. By putting an oil on these surfaces, you don't get the like dining room table look to it, but I'm okay with that. Every once in a while, because it's just a coat of oil on there, I'll run a random orbit sander over it and do a new coat of oil. When it starts to look gross, I'll run a sander over it and add more oil. So one of the benefits to an oil finish on anything is that it's really, really easy to rejuvenate the finish, to rejuvenate the look by just adding more oil. So in a shop environment, I'd be way more prone to an oil finish. Like I said, boiled linseed oil, Watco Danish oil, tung oil, any of those for a work surface rather than a film finish. Okay. All right, so a little show and tell. We've come to the end of the questions. For me, I finished a Christmas gift today, and I'm fairly confident he's not watching. So pretty cool. It's a CNC project. And there's some cool stuff going on here. The background is textured. You see that? So one of the benefits, it's actually a cheat on my part to do the texturing, because started as one big board, cherry, and then I cut such that the letters in the border are left proud of the background. So even though I do that with a good sharp bit and it's CNC controlled, it's very precise, the background, you can see some of the CNC or some of the router cuts. So the next step is an 1/8 inch ball nose bit And when this textures with the CNC, it randomizes that pattern. So it's got kind of a hand carved look to it. But for me, even more better is that by doing the texturing, it's cut into that background where you could kind of see the cuts from the 3/8 inch router bit. And I don't have to try to sand all of this to even it out before I put sealer on it. So it's a great cheat when you're sign making to use that texturing, to do that texturing as a background, and then a little keyhole slot in the back there so it can hang on the wall. So that's happy to say that's done and ready to be gifted. On the tabletop question, I'm gluing up with Tight Bond 3/4 inch strips, 2 1/4 inches wide to make a 30-inch wide by 7 foot long, 2-inch thick bench. I use 10 plus inch sections, plane them down. Oh, yeah. So kind of saying the same thing. I'm trying to just scrub through it and see. His final part of that question is, am I nuts? I don't know. I can't speak to that. But regarding your woodworking, 30 inches wide, 7 foot long, 2-inch thick bench. So, no, that's a great way to go. So the question is really just about composing a tabletop, a workbench top. And then it's similar to what I just was talking about with putting it together in subsections, making those flat, then joining each of those 3 subsections to make one 30-inch wide, 7 foot long top when he's done. So that's a great approach. And it says it's going to weigh under about 150 pounds when it's done. Tiki Dave says, I'm getting kickback when I use a flush trim bit on my router. Can't figure it out. Using a template for the pattern, new bit, try different speeds, trimmed wood to an 1/8 inch. It could be an end grain thing. Like you just got to be real careful. You never want to start a flush trim to a pattern on end grain. You want to start on long grain and then ease into the end grain. If you can reduce your overhang, 1/8 inch isn't bad, but that also depends on the wood. Something like a red oak at an 1/8 inch is probably still going to be catchy. If you can reduce that closer to a 1/16 of an inch, it's going to go a lot better. John asks, is that texture a feature of VCarve or did you have to manually do it? It's just the texturing toolpath. So it's very easy to do. Once you're in there, it's in the toolpath side, not the design side. And it's one of the icons. If you hover, you'll see the one that says texture toolpath. And once you click it, there are a number of parameters in there that you can mess with. You can run straight across like I did. You can angle it. You can make the in cuts, the texturing aspect longer or shorter, deeper or shallower. And then of course, choosing a different round nose bit. I can show you the one that failed. On the first one, I did it with an 1/8 inch round nose. And had that. See how like mountainous it is? It's just way too pokey and sharp compared to this one, the final, which has way more of that kind of hand-carved look to it. So between changing bits and changing settings, you can come up with a lot of different looks. Mark says, on furniture projects, should you use grain filler over the de-wax shellac? before doing your top coat. I grain, well, you can do it either way. I typically grain fill raw wood, and then I do dewax shellac, then I do my top coat. I use aqua coat dewax shellac. I use aqua coat grain filler. I believe with their product, you can shoot the shellac. You can put the shellac on first if you want to. Check with aqua coat to confirm that. But like I said, I'm typically doing, I do my grain filler on raw wood. John says, nice. You're the best woodworking teacher ever. Well, thanks, John. It's one of the things that's weird with teaching this way is, 90 billion% of what I do is video teaching. I do teach in my shop and I teach on the road. But it's weird because you just throw all this stuff out there, you spew all this information, and you don't know. Like, are people sleeping right now or are they listening? I don't know. So it's nice. It's nice to hear a little bit of feedback. I'm going to show you one more thing because it's cool, and then we're going to be done. I don't know if I've talked about this, but I have been blacksmithing. So just recently, I did a blacksmithing class, my son and I, and then my friend Charlie. You've seen Charlie on some of the woodworking videos with me, and each of us made a tomahawk. Isn't that cool? We started with something like this, mild steel, folded over, and then there's a piece of high carbon steel there. So with one of these skins, you would fold that over with the high carbon steel in between, forge weld those pieces together, and then forge it into that shape. So I'm very much enjoying this blacksmithing thing. I have a nice little forge. I have basically a little metal shop set up in my garage here, and can't wait for my woodworking day to be done so I can go start my blacksmithing day. It's really been a lot of fun. Before we get out of here, remember, grab that cutting board guide information, click on the banner. It's going to take you to where you need to go. 5 videos, extensive PDF, 4 designs already in the can for you, plus all the information that's included in the videos. I think I don't see you again until January. So that being the case, have a great Christmas, have a happy New Year, and that's all I know. So Max, you can shut us down. Thanks for watching, everybody.